and Best, Director of Content at Alt Sports Data, and you're listening to the Alt Sports Show presented by NXTbets. NXTbets is the media arm of Alt Sports Data, and Alt Sports Data is the official data provider of emerging sports, specifically in the niche, alternative, and action sports space. ASD provides sports betting and daily fantasy operators such as DraftKings, FanDuel, and Underdog Fantasy with the odds and finishing positions for league partner events. Alt Sports Data provides official data for some of the most popular alternative sports leagues and competitions in the world, such as F1, Supercross, Disc Golf Pro Tour, World Surf League, and Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. Check out NXTbets.com to see all ASD's partner leagues and how you can bet or make picks on these sports. Everything is geo-targeted to your specific location, and we have exclusive sign-up offers. For betting odds and finishing positions for more sports such as USAC, Formula Drift, World of Outlaws, PBR, WSL, Highland Racing, and PFL, trust me, we have a lot more. Again, head over to NXTbets.com to see what your options are. Now to bring in today's guest. He's a force of nature in the world of motorsport where speed, precision, and heart collide. With over 25 years behind the wheel and on the pit wall, Alex Waters has lived and breathed racing from karting circuits to the global stage of Formula One. He's raced against legends like Nick Tandy, Daniel Ricciardo, and Sergio Perez. But his story does not stop at the track. Diagnosed with cancer as a teenager, Alex turned adversity into action, becoming a champion for young people battling the disease, raising nearly $1 million before he turned 18 years old. Very impressive. He's recognized by the Red Bull F1 Junior team and mentored by F1 icon Eddie Jordan. Alex's racing career evolved into one of elite driver coaching, podium finishes, and high-performance mentorship at world-class tracks from Silverstone to Sebring. He's coached everyone from rising stars to celebrities, worked with Red Bull as a partner manager, and entertained crowds worldwide as an F1 expert host. And now, he's launching a high-octane adventure club in Montana, blending luxury, adrenaline, and passion. Buckle up, Alex Waters isn't just a racer. He's a mentor, a visionary, and a game changer. Let's bring him in. Welcome in, Alex. Before we get into some questions, how are you? How was the F1 Miami Grand Prix?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. The Grand Prix was great. Busy as always, and we had a really exciting race. So it was a bit of a fan favorite this time around.
So for my first question today, Alex, I wanted to ask you, since NXTbets leans into alternative and extreme sports, I'd love to hear more about your own passion with them. I've done my research and know you do have quite some experience in the alternative niche sports space outside of just racing and driving. So what have you dabbled in outside of racing?
How long have you got? I'll start with kind of my favorites. I mean, a bit of everything. So I've always been a bit of I guess, an adrenaline junkie. I really don't like that expression, but it's often what I get called by my friends. I've sort of spent a lot of time skydiving, and that was a big one for me. It's funny, as a youngster, I raced cars, and then when I stopped racing professionally and went into coaching, I needed something else to kind of fill the void in my life that wasn't motorsport. And so I ended up going into freestyle skiing, competing at that until I got a pretty serious injury. And then after that, I needed it again, so I ended up going skydiving with a friend, and that turned into an obsession. And then 1,200 jumps later, after wingsuiting and base jumping and all those things, I decided to hang that up. And now I'm back into the snow sports, speed riding. So that's where you've got a parachute over your head and you're skiing down the mountain. It gives you a ton more freedom in the backcountry. Just lots of sports. It's funny, isn't it? I don't know if it's the adrenaline itself. For me, it's more about the focal point and what it does for your mind, and sort of like a way of escaping all the kind of things that go on in life that keep your head busy. So that's more what it's about for me. I remember in skydiving, I'd be in the airplane asleep on the way up.
Definitely a thrill seeker.
Yeah, well, when you do your first jump, it's terrifying, right? So you're in the plane, you're shaking, everyone's nervous, and then they go to throw you out the door, and you're kind of it's a lot, right? But once you've done it a few times, it becomes almost like meditation. So I had my little routine, if you like. I get in the plane, do all my checks, go to sleep. I had a little ditter in my beeper in my helmet that would tell me various altitudes that we were at on the way up and on the way down. And I'd use that to kind of wake myself up, get ready for the jump. Yeah, it's a pretty amazing sport.
After 1,200 jumps, is it still just as scary every single time? Or do you still have that stomach drop moment for every single one?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not really about that anymore. The focal point for me is you jump out of the plane, right, and you'll have a dive flow. So I'll be jumping with a bunch of people who are equally skilled or better, and we'll have a dive flow. So there'll be a plan for the jump. You know, what most people perceive as skydiving isn't what real skydiving is. You know, when you jump out on your stomach and you put your hands out like this and you're falling straight down with someone strapped to you, that's not really skydiving. It's akin to doing a red letter day in a race car where you go and drive 3 laps in a Ferrari. It's not a track day. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, I actually don't know what you mean because I've never done it, but maybe I will know what you mean someday. I don't know. I skydiving scares me a little bit, the concept of it, but I don't know. Maybe it'll make the bucket list, especially after this conversation. But having races across so many formats from karting to GT, how do you see, would you say F1 differently than just your average viewer or somebody who's even like new to watching F1?
That's a good question. I mean, look, it's such an in-depth sport. What most people don't realize is how technical the sport is. And as you get brought into the sport and you become more passionate about it, you start to learn some of the nuances. What worked really fantastically for Formula One was Drive to Survive, which is the television series that came out. Perfect timing during COVID when everyone was sitting around watching Netflix. And it really delved into kind of the personalities of the sport and created this kind of entertainment around the sport. Of course, being a entertainment show, they exaggerate some of the components of it, but very much has brought in this new wave of interest and passion into the sport. And people, as you see them get into it and sort of become slightly obsessed with it, they start to realize how technical the sport is. And there's so much to it. You know, most teams, there's up to 800 staff, you know, working together to get 2 cars onto the grid at each race. Think about the resource right there and what's involved with that. You know, from the marketing and hospitality teams to the technical side, developing the cars, traveling all over the world, the logistical support, and then the deep side, technical data driven side of the sport. I actually just worked for AWS. I was hosting all of their guests. That's Amazon Web Services, sorry, in Miami, and you know, discussing with them their partnerships with Ferrari, for example, and how the data transfer real time from the cars when they're traveling at 150 to 200 kilometers an hour, miles an hour, sorry, on track, is sending data to the pit lane, which is going back to the factory in Italy and then back to the track all within a second. And there's like a million data points being sent every second. And there's at any one time, there's like 25 engineers looking at that real time data and tracking certain aspects of that just to keep the cars running on track. So this is one tiny fraction of what I'm talking about. So the sport as a whole is there's so much going on. My job really within the sport is to uh, not get too technical, but to bring a bit more of that technical expertise into the more general viewpoints.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That totally makes sense. Kind of brings me to another question, specifically about McLaren. Obviously, they've been turning heads so far this season. What do you think they're doing differently that's setting them apart from everyone else?
You know, I don't think they're doing anything differently. Again, within the sport, what you see is they every so often we get these homologation changes or big regulation changes where you see the cars suddenly all change shape and design. The last time that happened was 2022 when we went into that kind of new generation of car. And this evolution or these homologations are set by the FIA, which is the governing body of the sport. And what they do is they allocate regulations to basically try and make the sport more entertaining, make the racing good, improve performance and technology and all of that stuff. Well, typically when we see one of those changes, one of the teams typically gets a bit of a head start, whether that's through obviously they've all got phenomenal engineering teams and minds behind all of this, but for example, Mercedes went from being the leaders, right, with Hamilton's dominance for many years to suddenly a switch to Red Bull, and that was because Red Bull got the ethos right, if you like, in the engineering department on the direction to go with regards to physics. And Mercedes got it wrong, like really wrong. And so you saw this huge shift to Red Bull being dominant for years. And so the FIA recognized this and have made some big shifts to adjust the homologations much sooner. So we're now seeing a big change in 2026. So we've only had this 4-year window because they thought that Red Bull was just going to run off in the distance for another 5, 6 years, like teams before. But in fact, what's actually happened is the teams have really come closer and closer. I mean, this is one of the tightest years in Formula One history. I mean, last year was phenomenal. This year is even closer. We're seeing some of the tightest times on track we've ever seen. Um, and it's phenomenal for the sport. It's so exciting. You don't just see this dominant driver disappearing off into the distance. Back to your original question, McLaren have obviously worked it out better than the other teams. And it's not a case of them doing anything different per se. It's just having the team working together, molding really, really well, and getting the work done on track really helps with the drive behind the scenes. So all those guys you don't see at the racetracks, those hundreds of staffs that are working diligently at the factories, get really inspired when the team's working well together, and the performance is coming. It's like a early payday. So you typically see these guys working even harder because they really want to get that championship in, or see their driver win a world championship. Whereas Red Bull, previously, their dominance has kind of fallen off because there were some big upsets within the team last year, from politics with the team management through to the engineering team and the head of the engineering team leaving the team. So they've had a big disruption there, and behind the scenes, a lot of their top engineers have moved to other race teams following other management. So they don't really talk about that much, but that's why Red Bull's been struggling and why it's allowed another team to sort of take the mantle for now.
What, in your opinion, separates the elite consistent performers like Verstappen, Norris, and Piastri?
Mindset. It's all mindset. Look, at the end of the day, I've had this conversation so many times, and I've assessed it and thought about it for my entire career, really. Like, what's the difference between the top level performers and guys who are good, you know? And the separation in actual talent, as far as ultimate lap time or skill, is usually very small. I can take a guy off the street who's got the budget to go racing, and within 4 years, I can get them to a world class level. Um, Unless they've got zero aptitude, in which case I can't. But for the most part, you can do it, right? The difference really is the mindset. You look at someone like Max Verstappen; he's just so mentally resilient. Piastri is another phenomenal one. He just doesn't make mistakes, no matter the pressure. And by the way, the pressure in Formula One, think about it. There's 20 drivers globally in Formula One. That's it. So out of 8 billion people, there's 20 people who get to drive Formula One cars. Okay, they don't have the entire world watching them, but the pressure of the financial responsibility that you've got in those cars, to the 800 people who've worked diligently to put that car on track for you, to all your sponsors, investors, to all the fans, it's immense. It's so hard to explain, and almost impossible to explain unless you've experienced something similar, right? So um,
You see a little bit in Drive to Survive. I have watched Drive to Survive. You see kind of what it looks like visually.
yeah. Yeah, and off track, from in my career, right, we didn't have the funding to do exactly what we wanted to do. It's a very elitist sport, but off track was most of my job. I would say driving was probably 5% of what I actually, of the actual job. Most of it was off track, public speaking, standing up on stages, trying to raise funding, dealing with sponsor management, all of that stuff. So the pressure once you're actually in the car is immense, right? And you see Piastri, he's like ice cold. Kimi Räikkönen was like that, just bulletproof when they came under pressure. Max is phenomenal to watch. I love him. He's so exciting, and the fact that he's got this demeanor to him, a bit like the Schumacher era. It's cool, he creates drama, and people love that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Kind of like going off of mindset too. From a driver's perspective, or even from your perspective, what would you say is the most difficult circuit on the calendar, and why?
That's a good question, and there's multiple ways to answer that. In simple terms, I would say it's going to be somewhere like Singapore or Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. Those tracks, Jeddah's really fast, high G corners. You can't make any mistakes. If you've watched the race, they're within millimeters of the walls the entire race, and it's the highest speed circuit on the calendar now. So you make a mistake there, you get punished. So that one I would say is one of the toughest. And Singapore, just because of the temperature. Um, Again, what most people don't realize, and the TV doesn't translate very well, is the G forces these guys are under, and the immense fitness they need to have. And it's not really talked about enough. I wish Drive to Survive would do a better job of, maybe following them behind the scenes of some of their fitness training, because Formula One drivers are world-class athletes. Some of these guys, Valtteri Bottas just came second in the Australian gravel championship for fun on a weekend. You know what I mean? These guys are really, really serious athletes, because they're having to deal with, I'll give you an example. They can break up to 4.5G, which is 4.5 times your body weight when you hit the brake pedal. And they can lean into corners at almost 4G as well. So That's a lot of force. I mean, a fighter jet doesn't go through those forces very often, to put it into perspective. And these guys are doing that, I don't know, 10 to 20 times a lap. And then you do 300 kilometers without stopping. Then you add in 80% humidity and, depending on which country you're in, like 90 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the car. It's phenomenal, the performance level you need to have. And the TV doesn't translate that. But those, I would say, for me, would be the toughest tracks for the drivers.
Yeah, no, I feel like, and even going off of what I was saying before about Drive to Survive, you obviously get a certain, uh, perspective just by watching the show, but you don't always necessarily see like the details of team culture. You don't. I mean, you kind of see it, but I feel like you don't really know it unless you're in it. How important would you say team culture is in F1, and what's the relationship like between drivers, engineers, etc.?
So for me, the team's communication is imperative. The driver and his engineer have to be at one the entire time. There are famous pairings throughout history where those relationships have been so key to the success of both the driver and the team. And without that, inevitably, there's always going to be failings. We just saw Hamilton move to Ferrari. He's got this new Italian engineer. They speak different languages at their core, and then their actual technical language is different too. So it's been a real challenge for someone like Hamilton to step into that, where he's had this long-standing, incredible relationship with Bono, his old engineer at Mercedes, it's a very famous partnership, who they just knew what each other was thinking the whole time. And now he's in a situation where the engineer doesn't know at all what he's thinking, and he'll say something and it gets misinterpreted, and then you see the performance loss on track. So no, it's hugely important, that.
Yeah, I can imagine, and it is interesting to think of it as, a team sport versus, I mean, obviously it's individual and team, right? Like, I feel like there are a lot of sports that are similar in that way. Um, I was a rower, and it's kind of like you have to individually perform to get your spot in the boat, but once you're in the boat, it's a team sport. It's kind of similar, I guess, in that way. Um, if you were coaching a rookie entering F1, what part of the car setup process would you spend the most time with them on, and why would you say that?
Yeah, I think in reality, if you're talking about Formula One, the drivers who are good enough to be in Formula One, that isn't really a conversation. The communication is the key, right? These guys already know how to drive the cars. They know how to feed back data. They know how to set the cars up with their engineers. Really, it would be the changes. So the big changes going from F2 to F1, and all the technical side of that. The additional settings on the cars, for example, and the mid-race communication, and making sure that's really dialed in and understood. There's a lot more controls at the driver's hands in a Formula One car because there's so many more systems, right? So if you take Formula One steering wheel, I've actually got one I could show you, but Formula One steering wheel, if you've ever seen a picture of one, they're covered in buttons and dials and
Yeah,
switches.
it almost looks like
Well,
a
an
it almost
F2,
looks like a video game controller when you see it on TV, and they
yeah,
go to the perspective of them actually driving, and they show the inside of the car. You're like, what am I looking at? Like, I feel like somebody who had no idea how to drive when they wouldn't know what to do. Like, am I playing
yeah,
Xbox or am I driving a car?
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I mean, they're so much more technical than Formula Two cars as far as the technology that's within the car, and the communication between the pit wall and the car, and the factory and all of that stuff, the live data streams and all of that. So on the steering wheel, the hands when you're on the steering wheel, there's everything you can reach as a driver with your thumbs whilst you're holding the steering wheel is what they're adjusting during the race. Typically, all the settings and buttons that are below that, they don't mess with during the race. It's just too much stuff. That's for the engineers to deal with. That's what they do during testing. If they have a problem with the car, or a sensor fails, for example, the engineers can see that and will tell the driver a code that then the driver can adjust those settings on the steering wheel to cancel that sensor, for example, and utilize a spare one. But for the most part, it's understanding those controls, how they work, and utilizing to the maximum efficiency, and getting a driver from F2 to F1, understanding that and how to utilize those systems. I mean, the electrical systems and the deployment is totally new to a Formula 2 driver. Yes, F2 have DRS, which is the drag reduction system, so they know how to use that. But what they don't have is all the electrical hybrid systems. So they have to learn all of that. So for me, it would be the communication with the engineering teams and understanding that technology through and through, not so much about setup, because at the end of the day, it's a race car and they're already in Formula One.
Right, right. That makes sense. Can you explain like a little bit about what DRS is? Like I know you hear it all the time if you're watching an F1 race, like they're always talking about it. Like in layman's terms for somebody who doesn't really know much about F1, what would be the easiest way to describe DRS?
Yeah, okay. DRS is the drag reduction system. Essentially, it's a portion of the rear wing that's on a pivot, and it has an actuator in the middle. So if you imagine the back of a Formula One car, you've got that wing. Essentially, drag reduction is they're opening the wing. So what they're doing is they're taking what is pushing the air as the air hits it this way. When you press the drag reduction, it just flattens it, so the air goes straight over the top of it. Um, so the effect of that, I mean, again, this isn't like a normal road car. Formula One cars generate a lot of downforce. That's how they're able to carry the speeds through the corners. It's how they're able to generate that 4.5 G of brake pressure or deceleration, sorry. And it's because of that grip. It's like, think of like a vacuum under the car. The aerodynamics are designed to suck the car to the ground. If you turned the track upside down, Formula One cars would stick to the ceiling at 60 miles an hour. That's how much downforce they produce. The value of it, so just to finish the point, the reason they give it to the drivers is on the straights, you don't need downforce, right? You only need it for the cornering and for braking. So on the straight line, which is where the DRS sections are, the driver can activate by pushing a button on the steering wheel, can open the wing, and it essentially speeds the car up because there's less drag. And the idea is that it allows them to overtake, almost like a boost button, but without the boost.
Yeah. Again, going back to the video games, the mushroom Mario Kart boost. With how much F1 tech has evolved, how have the drivers' roles changed in the last, I don't know, let's say decade?
You know what? I don't know that they've changed a lot. I think the reality is the schedule's gotten busier. So the drivers are doing more now on track than they were before. Previously, there was a lot more off track activations and stuff with sponsors. But the sport becoming so much more global and the access to money becoming so much more free for the teams, that's changed, right? So they spend more time, more races now, more track time, essentially. I would say the drivers now are much better trained than ever in history. You know, the young drivers we're seeing now are some of the best drivers that the world has ever seen, purely because they had the best training that the world has ever seen. Hamilton was the first example of that, right? He was one of the first drivers that was picked up as a 5-year-old by a Formula One team, given all the best equipment, which is key, by the way, if you want to have any chance of getting into Formula One, in each of the correct series that all of the teams are looking at. So he was basically put in all the right places by the right people, given the best opportunity to take that element of risk out of performance, and then trained by some of the best physios, best mentors, sorry, and drivers that the history had up to that point. He was like an experiment, and the experiment paid off. You know, he became one of the, well, he is the most successful driver in history, and we'll see. I think we'll see those records broken again in due course. It may not be soon, but the drivers are getting younger and younger. You know, Kimi Antonelli's 18, you know, and he's already pole sitter. He can win races. The guy's going to be a champion for sure if he is in the right equipment. We've seen it with Max. You know, he was in Formula One at 17, I think. He's been in Formula One for 10 years and he's still only in his 20s, and he's got 4 world championships. So, you know, the skill level is massive now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of going off of that, with young talent rising and AI tools even becoming more prominent, how do you see F1 evolving in, again, we can say the next decade or even just 5 years from now?
Again, a great question. I think technology-driven advancements, right? If I had a crystal ball and could see that, I'd be worth a lot of money. The answer is I don't know. I mean, it really comes down to what the FIA decide they want to do. Essentially, those rules and regulations, what they put in that box for the engineering teams to go and create, right? So I think a lot of it's all technology driven. We see the technology from Formula One filter down into the automotive sector. That sort of started in the mid 2000s, really, when all the manufacturers kind of moved into Formula One and started competing with each other and using that as a hotbed of technology development. And that is only accelerated, really. So with regards to AI, it's already being utilized within the teams for efficiency. across the board, by the way, not just in the technical teams, but in the marketing side of things as well. So I think we'll just see more of that. As the technology evolves so quickly, inevitably that will filter into the cars, and being the sort of pinnacle of automotive development, that will then be in the road cars before we know it. So, just a continuation of what we've seen over the last 10 years, really.
If you could change one thing about F1, what would it be? Or maybe it's not anything, but
Do you know what? It wouldn't be about F1 directly. It would be the FIA right now. So the Federation International Automobile, the guys who regulate Formula One and motors. I don't like their current president right now. There's a cultural clash, between the sort of his culture and the Western culture, and he's muting or trying to mute the drivers and their personalities, and I think that's a dangerous game. I don't like it. I think they should be free to have their own personalities, to say what they feel. This is sport that people want to watch. If you go back to the Roman days and they used to battle in the cages and stuff, none of that was muted. People wanted to watch it, the action. And in Formula One and sport now, we're seeing it in the Rally Championship, where the drivers are now refusing to do interviews because they don't want to get fined €10,000 or dollars for saying something they feel. I mean, it's sad to say, but people like to watch NASCAR and the oval racing because of the crashes, right? None of the drivers want to crash, but that's what makes the entertainment for the fans, and they love it, right? And I still think in Formula One, we've got so much action, so much stuff happening. The emotion when it comes out from the drivers is what people want to see. That's it. And when you tell them they can't swear, that they've got control of the TV rights, just mute it or beat it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Don't mute the drivers. It's crazy. So I don't. That's really the only thing I would change right now. Everything else to me is awesome. I love the way the sport's evolved, and it's been refreshed, and it was bought out by an American company that the Americans are pretty good at sports marketing. Let's just say that. So yeah, they really changed the game for Formula One. It's been great to watch and be part of.
yeah, no, it's been really cool to see just how big it's also gotten in the US. Okay, all-time favorite F1 driver, and then we'll go who's your favorite one to watch currently?
So, this, I feel like everyone's got the same answer to this. My answer is probably a bit different. It's Hamilton for me. I grew up alongside him within reason. I mean, he was 2 years old. He's 2 years older than me, but I watched him go through the karting ranks all the way up through his career, right? And for me, he's a phenomenal role model, and I think that's so important in sport for young people. I can't stand, for example, I don't watch soccer anymore because I don't. Sorry, British football we call it. Soccer I can't stand because the personalities and I don't see them as role models for young kids particularly, and that to me is a challenge. So I just don't enjoy watching that. I much prefer rugby as a sport. Typically, those guys are, again, good role models. They're all doing good things outside of the sport. And in Formula One, it's Lewis is the king of that. He's never really put a foot wrong when it comes to that sort of thing. He's obviously got the best reputation as far as performance. The numbers don't lie. He's won more championships than anybody else. Well, he's matched Schumacher, but he should have won more than anybody else, in my view. And right now, I would say my favorite driver right now is Lando Norris. He's definitely got some weaknesses, but I just think the character, the man that is Lando, is exciting. I think he's just a really good kid. I think that Piastri to me is a phenomenal driver, definitely probably better than Lando, but the issue for me is he's just a bit boring. He hasn't really got a personality, and that's a shame. So Lando's my one to watch, the one I was always support at tracks now, and Hamilton's my favorite. Throughout history.
But you get to build an F1 dream team, past and present. Who's your driver lineup, and which team principal would you steal?
I would just keep the McLaren lineup right now, to be honest. I would probably pick Fred Vassar as my team principal. And I would have those two drivers. What people have to remember, and what most people don't realize, is that Formula One a team needs a driver that's a number one and a driver that's a number two. You can't have two number ones. And I know McLaren's been very diplomatic about that, but they haven't really gotten to the point where they're really fighting for a championship until this year. So we're going to see some fireworks from those two for sure. They're not going to be best mates by the end of the season if we carry on the way we're going. I think that's a given. And they're both super talented, super good drivers. So right now it works great. Their relationship's amazing, and that's why they're able to work together. And they don't owe each other anything, right? At this point, it's let's game on. Let's see who's the best driver of the team and who does the best job. For me, that is a phenomenal driver pairing right now. I think the problem is if you try and put Max and Lewis together as an example, you've got two huge contenders, two world champions you can't have two number ones in a team. It does not work. Schumacher's era was great because he had the support of number two drivers. Vettel's was great because he had a support of a good number two. The team got maximum points because they'd be 1-2 or 1-2-3 podium all the time. I mean, that's what you need, and that's what Red Bull's lacked in the last few years with drivers in the number two car. They just can't drive the car because of Max's driving style and the way the car's designed. But yeah, I mean, that's a long way of answering that, I suppose. If I was going back in time and I wanted to pick two drivers from history, I would probably pick Hamilton. Would definitely be in there, and it probably would be probably Mika Hakkinen. He's just an absolute legend of a bloke and was a really exciting, cool driver to me. And you put him alongside Hamilton, he'd have to accept being number two to Hamilton, but it would be a good pairing.
I love it. I love it. Well, I mean, thank you so much, Alex, for coming on. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, and I'm so happy that we connected. And I mean, you crushed all the questions I had for you. Yeah, I again really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, guys.
Wow, what an amazing first episode and conversation with Alex Waters. I'm so excited for next week. And if you're hearing this, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really do appreciate you taking the time. Looking ahead to what's next on next week's episode of the Alt Sports Show presented by NXTbets, we will meet with a current PBR coach. But if you have picks, plays, or questions in the meantime, hit us up on social or at nextbets.com. But until next time, stay sharp, bet responsibly, and keep backing what's next.